Sweetheart, meet the new owner of your apartment, my mom announced as she barged into the apartment with my sister's suitcases. I'm taking your bedroom for your sister, so throw all your stuff out of there immediately, my family declared, tossing a jacket into my face. That's when I smiled and calmly said. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late April when the sound of my apartment door slamming open should have startled me, but I'd learned to expect the unexpected where my family was concerned. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the sight of my mother dragging two enormous suitcases across my threshold, my sister trailing behind her with a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. Sweetheart, meet the new owner of your apartment, Mom announced, gesturing toward Charlotte as if she were presenting royalty. Her voice carried that saccharine tone she always used when demanding something unreasonable, the one that made my stomach turn. I stood frozen in my kitchen, coffee mug halfway to my lips, trying to process what was happening. The apartment I'd worked 3 jobs to afford, the place I'd painstakingly furnished with second-hand finds and careful budgeting, was apparently no longer mine. I'm taking your bedroom for your sister, Mom continued, already heading down the hallway. So throw all your stuff out of there immediately. Charlotte snatched a jacket from the coat rack near the door and flung it at me. The leather hit my chest and slid to the floor. You heard her. Start packing. Something shifted inside me then, a strange calm settling over my shoulders like a familiar weight. I'd spent 28 years bending to their demands, apologizing for existing, making myself smaller so Charlotte could shine brighter. Not anymore. I smiled, setting down my coffee with deliberate care. Actually, I have a better idea. The confusion on their faces was almost worth the years of torment. Almost. This apartment is in my name. The lease agreement I signed 3 years ago states very clearly that I'm the sole tenant. So here's what's going to happen instead. I pulled out my phone, fingers already moving across the screen. You're going to take Charlotte's luggage and leave within the next 5 minutes, or I'm calling the police to report trespassing. Mom's face turned an impressive shade of crimson. You wouldn't dare. After everything we've done for you? The laugh that escaped me was hollow. Everything you've done? You mean like forgetting my high school graduation because Charlotte had a cold? Or using my college fund to pay for her wedding to Eric? Should I continue? Charlotte stepped forward, her expression darkening. You're being dramatic. Mom just needs you to help out for a few weeks while Eric and I work things out. The kids need stability. Work things out, I repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it when your husband catches you cheating? The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Charlotte's confident facade cracked, revealing the desperation underneath. How did you know about that? She hissed. Jennifer from work had a cousin who attended the same gym as Eric. Small world. But I wasn't about to reveal my sources. Does it matter? The point is, your marriage problems aren't my responsibility. Neither are Sophie and Dylan, much as I love them. You selfish brat, Mom spat. Your sister needs you. My sister has never needed me for anything except to be her punching bag. The words came easier than I expected, years of suppressed resentment finally finding their voice. Remember middle school? She told everyone I stuffed my bra. High school? She stole my prom date 2 days before the dance. College? She convinced you both that I was wasting your money on parties when I was working night shifts to cover what the scholarships didn't. Those were mistakes, Charlotte protested weakly. We were kids. You poured red wine on my white dress at your rehearsal dinner. We were adults. You did it because Eric's cousin mentioned I looked nice. The memory still stung, though less than it once had. You've spent our entire lives making sure I knew my place, and my place was always beneath you. Mom recovered enough to try a different tactic. Think about your niece and nephew. They adore you. Would you really put them on the street? Nobody's putting anyone on the street. Dad's house has 4 bedrooms. You and Charlotte can stay there while she figures out her next move. I crossed my arms, maintaining the calm exterior even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Or she could try apologizing to Eric and working on her marriage like an adult. Your father won't allow it, Mom said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Dad doesn't know you're here, does he? I watched her face closely, saw the truth in the way she avoided my gaze. He thinks you're at book club. Because he would have told you this was a terrible idea. Marcus had always been the rational one, the parent who actually listened when I spoke. He'd helped me move into this apartment, had been the only one to show up with boxes in his truck. He looked around the small space with its outdated fixtures and worn carpet, then told me he was proud of me. Fine. Charlotte grabbed the handle of her suitcase. We'll go to Dad's. But don't come crying to us when you're old and alone with no family who cares about you. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who only remember I exist when they need something. The truth of it resonated in my bones. Besides, I have family who cares. Aunt Paula calls me every week. She actually knows what I do for a living. That landed. Mom flinched, and Charlotte's jaw tightened. You always were ungrateful, Mom said, heading toward the door. We gave you everything. You gave Charlotte everything. You gave me leftovers and expectations. I held the door open, waiting. And I'm done accepting either. They left in a flurry of indignation and slammed doors. I locked the deadbolt behind them, then added the chain for good measure. My hands shook as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by something that felt surprisingly like relief. My phone rang within minutes. Dad's number flashed across the screen. Your mother just called me very upset, he said without preamble. Want to tell me what happened? I did, leaving nothing out. The attempted takeover, the demands, the jacket thrown in my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm proud of you, he finally said. I should have stepped in years ago. Your mother and I need to have a serious conversation about how Charlotte's been enabled. They can stay with you, though? I wasn't bluffing about calling the police. They can stay in the guest rooms. But there are going to be ground rules. He paused. And I think you and I should have dinner this week. Just us. I owe you several years' worth of apologies. We made plans before hanging up. I stood in my living room, looking around at the space I'd nearly lost, and felt something settle into place. The apartment was small, the furniture was mismatched, and the neighbors upstairs had a penchant for moving furniture at midnight. But it was mine. The following days brought a barrage of text messages. Mom oscillated between guilt trips and outrage. Charlotte tried bargaining, then begging, then threats. I blocked them both after the 15th message, each one more manipulative than the last. Work provided a welcome distraction from the family chaos. My cubicle at the marketing firm felt like a safe haven, a place where my competence was recognized and valued. Jennifer noticed my distraction during our morning meeting, pulling me aside afterward. You look like you haven't slept in days, she observed, her concern genuine. Is everything okay? I filled her in on the apartment incident, watching her expression shift from disbelief to outrage to something resembling pride. You actually stood up to them? That's incredible. It didn't feel incredible in the moment. My hands were shaking so badly afterward that I had to sit down for 20 minutes. The memory was still fresh, visceral. But I couldn't let them just walk all over me anymore. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. That took serious courage. Most people would have caved under that kind of pressure. Her validation meant more than she probably realized. Growing up, I'd been conditioned to doubt my own perceptions, to second-guess every instinct that told me something was wrong. Having someone outside my family confirm that I'd been mistreated helped solidify my resolve. The texts from Mom grew increasingly desperate as the week wore on. She claimed I was destroying the family, that my selfishness was breaking her heart, that I'd regret this decision for the rest of my life. Each message was a carefully crafted guilt bomb designed to detonate my defenses. I saved them all, creating a folder on my phone labeled evidence. Some part of me knew I might need documentation later, proof that I wasn't exaggerating or misremembering the manipulation. Charlotte's messages took a different approach. She alternated between playing the victim and attacking my character. One message would detail how difficult her life had become, how Eric was being unreasonable about the divorce, how she had nowhere to turn. The next would call me cold-hearted, accuse me of abandoning my niece and nephew, suggest that I'd always been jealous of her happiness. The contradictions would have been laughable if they weren't so exhausting. I showed some of them to Aunt Paula during our weekly phone call, needing reality checks from someone who understood the family dynamics. Classic Charlotte, Paula said with a sigh. She's never been able to accept responsibility for anything. It's always someone else's fault, someone else's job to fix her problems. Mom enabled it, I said, pacing my apartment. Every time Charlotte messed up, Mom was there to smooth things over, to blame everyone else, to make excuses. Your mother did the same thing her mother did to her, Paula explained. My sister grew up believing that appearances mattered more than authenticity, that keeping up the facade of a perfect family was more important than actually addressing problems. The revelation clicked something into place. Mom's behavior wasn't just about favoritism. It was generational dysfunction, patterns passed down like heirlooms nobody wanted but everyone kept anyway. How did you escape it? I asked Paula. I moved across the country at 18 and went to therapy in my 20s. Best decisions I ever made. Her voice carried warmth mixed with old pain. But I also didn't have kids, so I didn't have to worry about perpetuating the cycle. You're breaking it now, which takes tremendous strength. Dad kept his word about ground rules. He called to let me know Charlotte would be staying for 2 weeks maximum while she looked for her own place. Eric had filed for separation, and the house was being sold. Sophie and Dylan were staying with Eric's parents until their parents sorted out custody arrangements. How's Charlotte handling it? I asked, surprised to find myself curious despite everything. About as well as you'd expect. She's angry at Eric, angry at me for not taking her side unconditionally, angry at the world. Dad sounded weary. She asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if I was still speaking to you. What did you tell her? That my relationship with you is separate from her situation. That I can love both my daughters while acknowledging that one of them has been treating the other poorly for years. He paused. She didn't like that answer. I could imagine Charlotte's reaction, the indignant fury that anyone would dare suggest she was in the wrong. She'd spent a lifetime being coddled and validated. Accountability must have felt like a foreign language. My apartment became my sanctuary in a way it never had before. Every evening, I'd come home and lock the door behind me, reveling in the security of knowing nobody could just barge in and make demands. I rearranged the furniture, putting my own stamp on the space without worrying about anyone else's opinions. The bedroom that Mom had tried to claim for Charlotte became my creative space. I'd always wanted to try painting, but there had never been time or space for hobbies when I was constantly managing family emergencies. Now I set up an easel in the corner, bought some basic supplies, and spent my evenings experimenting with colors and textures. The act of creating something purely for myself felt revolutionary. No expectations, no judgment, no pressure to be good at it. Just the simple pleasure of learning something new and watching my skills slowly improve. Jennifer invited me to her book club, and I accepted despite my initial hesitation. The group met monthly at a wine bar downtown, discussing everything from literary fiction to true crime. The women were smart and funny, their conversations ranging from deep analysis to playful banter. This is my first book club, I admitted during my second meeting, sipping a glass of Merlot. I've always wanted to join one, but I never seemed to have the time. What changed? Asked Marissa, a teacher who'd been with the group for 3 years. I stopped letting other people's emergencies dictate my schedule. The words came out more honest than I'd intended, the wine loosening my usual guardedness. The table fell silent for a moment before Marissa raised her glass. To reclaiming our time and energy from people who don't appreciate it. Everyone clinked glasses, and I felt something shift in my chest. These women didn't know my history, didn't have preconceived notions about who I should be or what I owed anyone. To them, I was just a person worth knowing, worth including, worth spending time with. The holidays approached with creeping dread. Mom called in early November, her voice strained but a tempting cheerfulness. We need to discuss Thanksgiving plans. I'm not sure I'm attending this year, I said carefully, stirring sugar into my coffee. I've been thinking about starting some new traditions. Don't be ridiculous. Family gathers for Thanksgiving. It's tradition. Her tone sharpened. Charlotte and the kids will be there. Don't you want to see your niece and nephew? The guilt trip was predictable but still effective. I missed Sophie and Dylan terribly. They were innocent victims in this entire mess, caught between their mother's poor choices and the resulting family fracture. I'll think about it, I said, refusing to commit. I need to go. Talk to you later. Hanging up felt like a small act of rebellion. Old habits whispered that I was being difficult, that I should just agree to keep the peace. New awareness reminded me that keeping the peace had always meant sacrificing my own comfort and dignity. Dad called later that day with his separate invitation, the one that didn't include Mom and Charlotte. His approach felt like a lifeline, a way to maintain family connections without subjecting myself to toxicity. Work intensified as the year drew to a close. Our biggest client was launching a new product line, and my team was responsible for the marketing campaign. I threw myself into the project, grateful for the distraction and the chance to prove my capabilities. My supervisor, Nolan, called me into his office in mid-November. "I wanted to talk to you about your performance this quarter." My stomach dropped, anxiety flooding my system. Had I made mistakes? Missed deadlines? Failed to meet expectations? "You've been exceptional," Nolan continued, apparently oblivious to my panic. "Your work on the Henderson campaign exceeded all our projections. I'm recommending you for a promotion to senior marketing specialist." The relief was so intense I nearly laughed. "Thank you. I've really enjoyed working on the campaign." "It shows. You have a natural talent for understanding what resonates with audiences." He leaned back in his chair. "The promotion comes with a significant raise and more autonomy over project selection. Think about what kinds of accounts interest you, and we'll discuss it at your next review." Walking out of his office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Professional recognition based solely on my merit, not on family connections or who I knew. Just pure acknowledgement of my skills and hard work. Jennifer insisted on celebrating with drinks after work. "A promotion. That's huge. And well deserved," she added, flagging down our server. "You've been working your tail off." "It feels good to be recognized," I admitted. My family never really understood what I do for work. Mom still thinks I'm a secretary. "You're a marketing specialist about to become a senior marketing specialist," Jennifer corrected firmly. "Don't let anyone diminish that, especially not family who can't be bothered to learn basic facts about your life." The promotion came with an unexpected perk, a significant enough raise that I could finally start building real savings instead of living paycheck to paycheck. For years, my emergency fund had been repeatedly drained by family crises. Charlotte needed money for Sophie's medical bills. Mom's car broke down. Dad needed help with house repairs that Charlotte's kids had caused. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I could save money without the constant anxiety that someone would call asking for financial help. The freedom was intoxicating. "Your mother is furious with me," Dad admitted during our dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. "She thinks I'm taking your side." "Are you?" I asked, twirling pasta around my fork. "I'm taking the side of common sense and basic decency. There aren't sides in families, there should only be love and respect." He set down his wine glass. "I failed you in that regard. I let your mother's favoritism continue because addressing it meant conflict, and I took the coward's way out." "You were there for the important things," I said, meaning it. "My college graduation, when I got my first real job, when I signed the lease on the apartment. You showed up." "Showing up isn't enough. I should have made sure you felt valued every day, not just on milestones." His expression was pained. Charlotte got everything handed to her, and look where it led. She never learned consequences. You had to fight for everything, and it made you stronger, but that doesn't excuse how unfair it was. We talked for hours, clearing the air that had been thick with unspoken truths for decades. He promised to work on his marriage, to insist on family therapy if Mom wanted to repair her relationship with me. I promised to consider forgiveness once I saw actual change, not just words. 3 weeks later, Charlotte moved into a small rental across town. Eric proceeded with the divorce, and the custody arrangement gave him primary physical custody with Charlotte getting the kids every other weekend. The details came through Aunt Paula, who'd maintained relationships with both of us despite the family drama. "She's struggling," Paula said during one of our coffee dates. "The reality of her choices is hitting hard." "I'm not going to gloat," I said, watching steam rise from my latte. "But I'm also not going to rush in to save her." "Nobody expects you to." "Well, your mother does, but she's not thinking clearly." Paula stirred her cappuccino thoughtfully. "Helen called me yesterday, asking if I thought you'd help Charlotte with her rent next month." "Absolutely not." The answer came without hesitation. "Charlotte has a job. She has Eric's child support. She made her choices." That's what I told her. Paula smiled. She didn't like it much, but she's starting to understand that her tactics won't work anymore. Mom's texts had slowed to a trickle, each one slightly less accusatory than the last. She still hadn't apologized, but the demands had stopped. Progress came in small increments. Richard Chen, my attorney, had been worth every penny of his consultation fee. After the apartment incident, I'd wanted to ensure my boundaries were legally sound. He'd helped me draft a formal letter to my family outlining what constituted trespassing and harassment, complete with legal consequences. "You probably won't need to enforce it," Richard had said, sliding the document across his desk. "But having it in writing establishes a clear boundary. People tend to take things more seriously when lawyers get involved." He'd been right. The letter, delivered via certified mail, had resulted in a furious phone call from Mom that I'd let go to voicemail. After that, the harassment stopped. Work became my sanctuary. Jennifer had been my sounding board through everything, listening to updates and offering support without judgment. "Your family sounds exhausting," she said one afternoon, both of us eating lunch in the break room. "Mine drives me crazy, but at least they respect boundaries." "I'm still learning how to set them properly," I admitted. "It feels wrong sometimes, like I'm being cruel." "Setting a boundary isn't cruel. Respecting yourself isn't selfish." She pointed her fork at me for emphasis. "You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions, especially when they've never cared about managing yours." The word stuck with me, a mantra I repeated whenever guilt crept in. Months passed. Summer faded into fall, and the leaves outside my apartment window turned brilliant shades of orange and gold. I started taking weekend trips, visiting places I'd always wanted to see but never had the time or money for when I was busy bailing out family members. Dad and I maintained our dinner tradition, meeting every other week to talk about everything and nothing. He'd started individual therapy, working through his own patterns of conflict avoidance. Mom occasionally joined us, though those dinners were stilted and awkward, filled with careful conversation that avoided anything substantial. "She's trying," Dad said after one particularly tense meal. "It's hard for her to admit she was wrong." Trying would involve an actual apology, I pointed out. Not just showing up and pretending nothing happened. "You're right. I'll talk to her again." The apology, when it finally came, arrived via letter. Mom's handwriting covered 3 pages, detailing her regrets and acknowledging her favoritism. She didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify her behavior. She simply owned it and asked if we could start rebuilding our relationship. I read the letter twice, looking for manipulation tactics or hidden agendas. Finding none, I tucked it into my desk drawer to process later. Forgiveness wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It had to be genuine, and I wasn't there yet. Charlotte reached out 6 months after the apartment incident. Her message was brief, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious despite my reservations. She looked different when I walked into the cafe. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her designer purse was missing, replaced with something practical from a department store. The visible markers of her charmed life had faded. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." I almost didn't. Honesty seemed like the best policy. "What do you want, Charlotte?" "To apologize." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, staring into it like it held answers. "I've been in therapy. A lot of therapy. My therapist suggested I make amends with people I've hurt, and you're at the top of that list." "Go on." "I was jealous of you." The admission came quietly. "You were always so self-sufficient, so capable of handling things on your own. Everyone loved you for who you were, not what you could give them or how you made them look." "That's not how I remember it." I kept my voice neutral. "I remember being invisible unless you needed a scapegoat." "You're right. And I made sure you stayed invisible because your light made me feel inadequate." She finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry." We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe bustling around us with the noise of other people's normal lives. "Thank you for saying that," I said eventually. "I'm not ready to forget everything that happened, and I don't know if our relationship can be repaired." "I understand." She nodded, looking relieved just to have been heard. "If you ever change your mind, I'll be here. Working on being someone worth having a relationship with." We parted ways after finishing our coffee, No promises made, no obligations established. It felt strangely freeing, the absence of forced family bonds and expectations. Dad called that evening to check in. "Your mother told me Charlotte met with you today." "She did. She apologized." "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know yet." I curled up on my couch, the one I'd bought myself after saving for 3 months. It felt genuine, but I'm not ready to just welcome her back into my life. Nobody expects you to. Take your time. Process things at your own pace. He paused. "I'm having Thanksgiving at the house this year. Small gathering, just family who actually acts like family. Aunt Paula, Uncle Jim, and a few others. You're invited if you want to come, but there's no pressure." "Will Mom and Charlotte be there?" "They're invited too, but separately. Different times. I'm doing 2 small celebrations instead of 1 big one." He sounded tired. "It's unconventional, but this family needs some unconventional solutions." I agreed to attend the first celebration, the one without Mom and Charlotte. The holiday arrived with the first snowfall of the season, and I drove to Dad's house with homemade rolls and low expectations. The afternoon was surprisingly pleasant. Aunt Paula regaled us with stories from her travels. Uncle Jim taught me how to make his famous gravy. Dad presided over everything with quiet contentment, clearly relieved to have family gathered without drama. Eric called me in early December, his number appearing on my phone unexpectedly. We'd never been particularly close, but we'd always been cordial at family gatherings. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out," he began, sounding uncertain. "I got your number from your dad. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Is it about Sophie and Dylan?" Concern for my niece and nephew immediately overrode any awkwardness. "Partially. They've been asking about you." His voice carried a mixture of weariness and something harder to identify. "Sophie specifically wants to know why you don't come around anymore." The question hit harder than expected. "What did you tell her?" "That adults sometimes need space to work through disagreements. She's 9, so she doesn't really understand, but I'm trying to be honest without making her feel caught in the middle," he sighed. "I also wanted to apologize for never speaking up when Charlotte treated you poorly. I saw it happening, and I should have said something." The admission surprised me. "You noticed?" "Everyone noticed. Your parents just chose not to acknowledge it, and I went along with keeping the peace." Regret colored his tone. "I'm realizing now how much damage that kind of silence can do. I don't want my kids growing up thinking that's normal family behavior." We talked for nearly an hour, Eric sharing details about the divorce proceedings and his plans for co-parenting. Charlotte was fighting the custody arrangement, insisting she should have the kids more than every other weekend. Her lawyer told her she's not likely to win, Eric explained. She had an affair, left the marital home voluntarily, and her work schedule is unpredictable. The judge is going to prioritize stability for Sophie and Dylan. "How are they handling everything?" The question came from genuine concern, not nosiness. "Better than I expected, honestly. Kids are resilient." He paused. "My parents have been incredible. They pick the kids up from school, help with homework, make sure they have routines and structure. Sophie's in therapy, which is helping her process her feelings." "I'd like to see them sometime," I said carefully. "If that wouldn't complicate things for you." "I'd welcome it. They need positive adult figures in their lives right now, and you've always been good to them." His gratitude was evident. "Charlotte might not like it, but she doesn't get to control who I allow around our children during my custody time." We arranged for me to visit the following weekend. The prospect filled me with both excitement and nervousness. Would Sophie and Dylan blame me for the family fracture? Would they understand that my absence wasn't about abandoning them? Saturday arrived cold and bright, the winter sun reflecting off snow-covered yards. Eric's parents' house was in a quiet suburb, the kind of neighborhood with sidewalks and basketball hoops and American flags displayed year-round. Sophie answered the door, her face lighting up instantly. "Auntie." She launched herself at me, wrapping thin arms around my waist. The greeting filled me with warmth, reminding me why I'd agreed to this visit despite my nervousness. "Hey, kiddo. I've missed you." The words caught in my throat, thick with genuine feeling. Dylan appeared behind his sister, more hesitant but clearly happy to see me. At 6, he was more reserved than his exuberant sister, processing the world with careful observation. Did you bring games? He asked, hope evident in his voice. I brought card games and a new puzzle, I confirmed, holding up a bag. Your dad said you've gotten really good at puzzles. His shy smile was worth the hour I'd spent at the toy store trying to find age-appropriate gifts that weren't too extravagant. I didn't want to be the fun aunt who showed up with expensive presents to compensate for absence. I wanted to be the reliable aunt who showed up consistently. Eric's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, welcomed me warmly. They'd always been kind, the sort of people who treated everyone with equal respect regardless of family politics. We're glad you could make it, Mrs. Thompson said, ushering me inside. The kids have been counting down the days. The afternoon passed in a blur of board games and hot chocolate and laughter. Sophie told elaborate stories about school, her hands gesturing wildly as she described playground drama and cafeteria politics. Dylan showed me his collection of drawings, each one carefully preserved in a folder. This one is our old house, he said, pointing to a picture of a large structure with many windows. And this one is Grandma and Grandpa's house where we live now. The second drawing was noticeably smaller but filled with more details. Hearts on the door, flowers in the window boxes, stick figures labeled with names standing in the yard. You've made it a home, I observed, and he nodded seriously. Grandma says home is where people love you, not just a building. His childish wisdom cut through the complexity of adult situations with startling clarity. As the day wound down, Sophie curled up next to me on the couch, her head resting against my shoulder. Mom said you don't like us anymore. The statement hung in the air, loaded with hurt and confusion. I chose my words carefully, aware that whatever I said would be repeated and analyzed. That's not true at all. I love you and your brother very much. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that have nothing to do with kids. My disagreement is with your mom about grown-up things, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. Do you have a disagreement with Dad too? Her question was logical, seeking patterns to make sense of chaos. No, your dad and I are good. That's why I'm here visiting you at his house. I smoothed her hair back from her face. And I want to keep visiting if that's okay with you. It's really okay. She snuggled closer. I missed you at Thanksgiving. I missed you too. But sometimes taking care of ourselves means making hard choices about where we spend our time and energy. The explanation felt inadequate, too simplified for the complicated reality. Eric drove me out to my car later, the kids waving from the front window. Thank you for coming. It meant the world to them. Thank you for making it possible. I unlocked my car, then turned back. If there's anything I can do to help with them, let me know. I can't be involved in anything related to Charlotte, but I want to be there for Sophie and Dylan. I appreciate that. They need all the stability and love they can get right now. He glanced back at the house. Charlotte's not doing well. Her parents are concerned about her mental state. Is she getting help? Despite everything, I didn't want Charlotte to genuinely suffer. I just wanted her to stop hurting other people. She's supposed to be seeing a therapist, but I don't know if she's actually going or just telling people she is. He shrugged. Either way, it's not my problem to solve anymore. I have to focus on my kids. Driving home, I reflected on how much my life had shifted in just a few months. The scared woman who'd nearly given up her apartment to avoid conflict felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone who could set boundaries with family while maintaining relationships with the people who mattered. Christmas approached with its usual commercial frenzy. I decorated my apartment with simple white lights and a small tree, creating traditions that belonged only to me. No elaborate productions to impress relatives, no expensive gifts bought to compensate for emotional neglect. Just quiet celebration of making it through a difficult year and coming out stronger. Paula invited me to spend Christmas Eve with her, and I accepted gratefully. Her apartment across town was filled with eclectic decorations collected from her travels, each piece telling a story. I'm proud of you, she said, handing me a glass of wine as we settled in to watch old movies. This year took guts. This year took a lot of therapy, I corrected with a laugh. I started going in September. Best decision I've made besides standing up to Mom and Charlotte. Therapy is brave too. Most people would rather stay miserable than do the hard work of changing. She raised her glass in a toast. To hard work and new beginnings. The new year arrived with possibility instead of dread. My promotion became official in January, complete with a new title on my business cards and a desk near the window. The raise allowed me to start saving aggressively, building the financial security I never had before. Charlotte reached out again in February, her message more subdued than previous attempts at contact. She asked if we could meet for coffee again, no expectations, just a chance to talk. I considered declining. The last meeting had been emotionally draining, dredging up old wounds even as it provided some closure. But something in her message suggested genuine humility rather than manipulation. We met at the same cafe, though this time the atmosphere felt less charged. Charlotte looked healthier than she had before, some color back in her cheeks and less desperation in her eyes. "I've been going to therapy twice a week," she said without preamble. "Actually going, not just saying I am to make people leave me alone." "That's good. I'm glad you're getting help. It's harder than I expected. Having to face all the things I've done, all the people I've hurt." She wrapped her hands around her mug, a gesture I recognized from our first meeting. "My therapist says I have a lot of work to do on taking accountability." That's a start. I wasn't going to offer effusive praise for meeting basic standards of human decency. I know I can't undo the past. I know an apology doesn't fix decades of being terrible to you. She met my eyes, and I saw genuine remorse there. "But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Not because I expect anything from you, but because it's the right thing to do." We talked for an hour, the conversation less fraught than I'd anticipated. Charlotte shared updates about her custody battles and her new job working retail, a humbling change from her previous lifestyle. I shared surface-level details about work in my apartment, keeping boundaries intact even as I allowed tentative connection. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte said as we prepared to leave. "Did you ever resent Mom and Dad for how they treated us differently?" "Every single day." The honesty felt liberating. But I also learned that I couldn't control their behavior. I could only control my response to it. She nodded slowly, processing. "I'm starting to understand that. My therapist talks about it a lot. Taking responsibility for my own choices instead of blaming circumstances." We parted with careful optimism, no promises made but no doors permanently closed either. Healing might be possible someday, though it would require sustained effort and genuine change, not just words. "This is nice," I told him while we were washing dishes together. "Peaceful. It's what family should be." He handed me a plate to dry. "I'm glad you came. The house feels more like a home when you're in it." Driving back to my apartment that night, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The scared woman who'd stood in her kitchen watching her family try to take everything she'd built was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth, who could set boundaries without drowning in guilt, who understood that family was supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. My apartment welcomed me back, warm and quiet and entirely mine. I made tea and settled in with a book, grateful for the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. The journey wasn't over. Healing never followed a straight line. But I'd taken the first steps, and that was enough for now. The woman who'd smiled calmly and defended her home that chaotic afternoon had discovered something powerful. Self-respect wasn't selfish, boundaries weren't cruel, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply say no. My family might never fully understand the gift they'd given me by trying to take my apartment. They'd forced me to finally stand up for myself, to recognize that I deserved better than the scraps of affection they'd been throwing my way for decades. I was done settling for less than I deserved. The apartment was just the beginning. Everything else in my life would be held to the same standard going forward: respect me, or lose access to me. It was simple, clear, and non-negotiable. Exactly the way boundaries should be.